Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here. Reality check. Please subscribe, like, and all that jazz, and help me out. I've got a guest that I think you're really going to like. His name is Christopher O'Brien. He's written many books on strange subjects. See The Mysterious Valley, Exit the Valley, Stalking the Herd. That's from memory, and I've read them all. So Chris, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've had a chance to really sit down and talk.
Yeah, and the world's gone crazy since I saw you last.
It has. I feel like on June 15th, 2015, they did some super secret Large Hadron Collider CERN experiment, and they were jumping up and down after it, saying how wonderful it was, it worked. And of course, they couldn't tell anybody what it was because it was classified. And I think what they did was they accidentally slipped our time continuum sideways into a bad alien dark reality show comedy, because immediately after the CERN experiment, Donald Trump announced his presidency for the United States. Now, of course, I'm saying this with a little bit of levity, but the more things go here,
certainly getting surreal.
Getting surreal, my God. I never in a million years, growing up and during my psychedelic days and thinking I knew what was going to be happening and stuff, never would I have imagined this. This would have been so far down the realm of possibilities. If there are infinite many worlds and many parallel dimensions and realities that are spinning off, how the hell did we get stuck in this one? God, you're lucky, man. You're where I was for so many years. You're high and dry. That's the best place to be.
It is
for a respiratory pandemic.
Yeah, it is, and I'm very, very happy I chose where I lived and where I'm living right now, and glad I'm not in the city. And I just really moved here a little over a year ago. I was living up in the Boulder, Denver area, and finally, I got here to Southern Colorado, San Luis Valley, which is, the place that you've written your books about.
Right.
So my listeners and viewers know that I think that there's like a parallel world that sits within our world, mm-hmm. and that occasionally there's like tears in the fabric between the two worlds, and that there are places where these tears happen more than other places for whatever reason.
Like one about maybe a half a mile from your house.
Yes, he showed me that place. I put a trail cam there, by the way.
Oh, cool.
I put a trail cam there, and I've actually, I don't have a clear one yet, but I've got these very dim orbs that were in that spot that you showed me.
Yeah,
so
that's
they're not the people just say it's lens flare. So I'm not going to show it to anybody because I don't want to drop my water here. I don't want anybody like accusing me of faking or whatever.
Mystery mongering.
Yeah, exactly. But so there's all these places like Sedona and Skinwalker Ranch, and in England, the places with Glastonbury, that area there has, and they all have the people that live there all report seeing these like orbs. They're blue, different colors, but they're seen, commonly. And I'm just wondering, is there, in your research, is there a pattern? Are we looking that we can look for?
There actually is. I've noticed that when at least in the valley there, when things are going to go into a heightened state of activity, whether it's a week, a month, several months. Usually it's not longer than 2 or 3 months, but there's a definite increase. And the way you know it's coming is when you start seeing what I call the cheap fireworks. And there are these weird, like giant bottle rockets that arc and then fizzle out. And then, I've told this to, I've asked a couple of scientists about this. And the first thing, of course, they say is, well, you're obviously seeing a meteor and it's a shooting star and you don't know what you're looking at. Well, I was way up in Chalet 1, which is probably about 2,500 feet above the actual valley floor. It was a uniform overcast sky. And I saw one of these things arch right over Spanish Creek and lit up the tops of the trees. Don't tell me that was a meteor. It was running parallel to the ground. I've had these things appear within maybe 30 or 40 feet of me. I had a guy call me. One of my favorite sighting reports was a guy called me and he says, I'm sitting here scratching my head. I don't know how to describe it, but the only way I could describe it is I just saw Tinkerbell crash.
Right.
And so when these things start happening, that is the presage kind of it's kind of an indicator that we're going into a wave of heightened activity.
Really?
And that's where everybody around there should really be aware. And they tend to fizzle out during the wave. But then as soon as you start seeing them again, that's the end of the wave. And I've seen this pattern repeat on a number of occasions. And they're generally kind of a diffuse yellowish white. They look like a bottle rocket that doesn't explode. It fizzes. And it's a big bottle rocket. Some of these things actually leave smoke trails, which I've seen actually on a couple of occasions, the bigger ones. When we do have then the waves of activity, the most common thing that you'll see are fairly high-flying silver orbs. Yeah. And they can jump around. I've seen them go at least 6-7 miles in less than a second. And it's like they blink out and then blink on further away.
Yeah, I've seen those.
They tend to be rather large, but they're pretty high up normally. And then probably the most common ones are the orange orbs, which are mid-sized. They can get as big as a garage. My girlfriend and I and her daughter watched 2 of them go all the way down the length of the valley, one after another. And they, we were about halfway. They looked like they were about halfway to Swatch, and they had to have been big. And they were these roiling orange balls of light. And I could have timed on my watch 8 minutes, which was the time it took for the Air Force to show up and chase after them. So when they're flying low like that, I don't know how they spot them. They must be watching the airspace from orbit, because everything is radar invisible in the valley. There's no radar from 18,000 feet down to 7,500 feet, which is the valley floor. And then I've had the little red orbs, which are very similar to what you saw when the red orbs were chasing after the craft in Close Encounters, with the cops chasing them. Mm-hmm. The little orb goes to the toll booth, turns into 5 orbs, and rings all the bells.
Right.
I've seen those little. They definitely appear to be under intelligent control. My band was coming back from recording in Denver. We were just outside of Fort Garland, coming down La Vita Pass, and right as we got to the valley that's there with the little creek going down, one of these things came right out and it paced our car. I could have thrown a rock and hit it. That's how close it was. Couldn't have been more. It was less than 50 feet away from us, and it paced our car for, I don't know, quarter mile. And my band was just going bonkers. 2 of them had never seen anything before. Yep. And the other 2 had been with me on occasions when we did see things. And they were like, banging it around, just saying, yes, finally we got to see something. And then we have the blue orbs, which are similar to the description that Terry Sherman gave me on the phone, real time, of the blue orb that came at Skinwalker Ranch, came down at night, checked out his livestock, his horses, and then checked out his wife. I mean, within touching distance. Really? And then he yelled at her to get away, get back over here. And it did an arc up in the air and curved around the top of the barn, and all the lights dimmed. And his 3 dogs, he's got, 3 well-trained, well, he did have 3 well-trained working dogs, like Australian Shepherds and stuff. They would go tear ass after this thing. And Terry says, look, I got to go get my dogs, man. I'll call you back tomorrow. Well, he didn't call me back. So I waited till about mid-afternoon, and I called him, and I said, well, what happened? What happened? He goes, I got out there. I heard my dogs. It was just awful. I couldn't even describe what it sounded like. It just freaked me out. I didn't want to go out there. I was too scared. I went back out in the morning, and there were 3 grease piles with
wow,
singed hair. And those blue orbs, they're not as prevalent in the valley, but the very night that Terry had that sighting, I had a report of blue orbs in the San Luis Valley. Go figure. What are the odds? And they're the rarest type. So then the big green ones are the big green moon-sized objects that were reported all the way back into the late 40s, early 50s in the Southwest. That created actually a quite an extensive study by the Air Force and astronomers. These mystery green fireballs. I've seen one of them, and I was just making the turn onto T Road, headed into Crestone, and this thing went from Blanca all the way to Methodist, right over the tops of the mountains. It had a slight little tail. It was going parallel to the ground. It was not arcing. I felt a crackling sound, like kind of a white noise in my ears during the event. And that was one of the first real major sightings that I had. So there you go. I think we've gone down all the colors. I've never had a report of a purple orb.
Nope, never heard of that.
Yeah. The orange orbs are often associated with mutilation cases too, by the way.
Well, before we go any further, because I want to hear more on that. Just so you know, we're talking about the largest, highest valley, I believe, in the world. In the world, yeah.
No, it's the largest alpine valley in the world.
Right. It's at 7,500 feet, varying to 8,000, depending on where you are. And it sits between the San Juan Mountains and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which means, I think, the Blood of Christ Mountains. And that's because they turn blood red at night and the sunset. Quite beautiful, by the way. And this valley was a glacier, and the glacier melted, and there's a huge aquifer underneath it, which a lot of people are trying to steal. Now Denver is trying to steal all of our water. And there's just a lot of weird stuff going all the way back to the first Spanish who came to the valley 400 years ago. So yeah, and they reported weird stuff, and the Native Americans of Navajo were actually, their legends claim that they came out of Mount Blanca, where they were saved from the catastrophe by the Ant people, whoever the Ant people are. And then the Navajo were driven out of here by the Ute, I believe, who drove them south to where they are.
Well, and the Kiowa and the Comanche.
And the Comanche, right.
13 tribes.
Go ahead.
13 tribes lived in the valley for hundreds, possibly, up to 1,000 years. It's the only spot in North America where 3 major regional groups of Indians overlapped. The Plains Indians would go there, the Southwest Indians, the Navajo, the Hopi, and then, of course, the Great Basin Indians, the Utes, the Paiutes, and even the southern Front Range Plains Indians, the Comanche and the Cheyenne, would also come to the valley. And there was an agreement among all the tribes that if you were in the valley, there was no personal effrontery. There was no fighting. It was one term has been loosely translated as the Bloodless Valley. It was basically a place for vision quests and hunting. And curiously enough, right in front of the sand dunes there to the west are some of the earliest known human remains in North America. up until these recent finds that are pushing the dates way back. But
Way back.
there are Dennis Stanford from Stanford University, who we just lost a couple of years ago. He'd been digging out there at the cattle guard site since the early 70s, and they've found incredible Clovis points, and in conjunction with mastodons.
Really?
And so those meadows out there could, and all around there, that area that location that I pointed out to you, that kind of rent in the fabric of time, if you will.
What is that? God.
I know it's
like,
oh
well, we're anyway. Yeah, it's just too weird.
yeah.
And,
The Indians camped at that site for thousands of years.
yeah, and there's like four trees, pine trees that are like an exact square, and they're like 200 years old. So,
Yeah, well, they were split. It was 4 trees split by the Indians into 8 trees.
right, and you can see it. You can see it was human done, long time ago.
Yeah,
And there's no doubt about it. And then there's these strange ripples of the land in the valley that are just strange as hell. And when if I fly my drone and I look at it, because I'm trying to figure out what caused it. The standard explanation, of course, it was flooding. Must have been a hell of a lot of water. And but I don't know about that. I don't know. I can't figure out what shaped the valley, and I'm still working on it. But you got interested in all this because you when you were younger, you read about the first animal mutilations that happened here in the valley, right?
well, the first ones that were widely publicized around the world. Yeah, the Snippy the horse case,
Snippy the horse, right?
which occurred September 7th, 1967. I was a 10-year-old kid, in the grocery store in Bellevue, Washington, with my mom, and we were standing there waiting in the checkout line. No social distancing back then.
Yeah.
And I noticed the National Enquirer had this headline: "Flying saucers killed my horse." And so I grabbed it and I looked, and there's the famous picture of Snippy lying on the ground with the owners looking and pointing down at him. And I begged my mom. I said, "Come on, give me a quarter. Give me a quarter. I want to get this, or 50 cents or whatever it was." And she says, "Okay." I read that article, I think, before we even got out of the parking lot. I just tore that up. And that's when I first heard of the San Luis Valley.
Right.
And wouldn't you know it, in '89, I moved to Santa Fe. And I just instantly hated it. I just said, I love visiting here, but I can't see myself living here. And I had 2 friends that lived up there in the Baca, and they said, "Hey, come on up and check this place out." And I went up and was there for 13 years.
Wow.
When I arrived, there was 155 people.
Yeah, we're hitting almost 4,000 now.
4,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
We actually have traffic jams.
I know. Well, if I come out with another book, it's going to go even.
Yeah.
Every time I come out with
you.
the land values raise and the housing starts go up. I mean, it's an obvious curve. I was trying to shake down the realtors and get them
you definitely should be getting a percentage, because I can't tell you how many people have told me they moved here because they read your books. They wanted to be around the high weirdness.
They will never, ever forgive me for that.
No, they won't.
All the people wanted it for themselves. But hey, that's nothing, man. I got a TV show that I'm signed in a development deal on the Valley, yeah. By a major production.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I can't really talk too much about it yet, but it's going to be done the right way, and I've really put my foot down. It's the particular cable
you
channel.
told me. I now remember you telling me about
Yeah,
it. Right. So did they agree to what you wanted?
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
I just said, look, there's no way you're going to get 2 25-year-olds that don't know anything about the subject to be the host for this thing. So they fired them. And then the people that I recommended for a team show
yes,
have all, been...
they're on board.
Yeah, they're all on board. So
That is, folks, this is huge. This is huge because I know who he's talking about. And we're talking about the A team here. We
yeah,
really are. And,
yeah.
and you're going to be filming in the Valley?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, that's
The whole
great.
thing is about the valley.
Great.
So, and
Well, let
then
me
maybe
know.
after a couple seasons there, then we'll go to Mount Adams, or we'll go to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Hudson River Valley, or
yeah.
to Mount Shasta, or anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I know Bruce Cornett. You know who he is?
Sure, I've known him for years.
Yeah, yeah. It's just strange stories about the Hudson Valley. They're just
Oh
so
yeah,
weird.
and
Yeah,
Ellen Crystal.
yeah.
Oh man,
It's
remember
just
her?
like
Oh, she
how can
was
you
a.
explain this, right? I mean, Bruce's story just breaks my brain. You
I
know,
know.
I just like what they tell you to go out to the valley and take pictures of them, right?
Right,
It's like
right.
okay, so
Hey, but the guy, what? He's got a PhD
he does the physics.
in physics. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he was the last managing director for NIDS.
that's right. He was. I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
yeah,
Dang, I just saw him recently, about a month ago.
yeah. He came out of the woodwork here after a while.
Yeah,
I haven't
yeah,
heard about him in a while.
yeah. Definitely interesting guy. Maybe I'll
Yep.
have him on the show. I think I will. So you got to the valley and then so how did you go from well I guess a rock and roller to the premier journalist covering the high weirdness of the valley? How did that happen?
For when I first got there, of course, I was all excited, and I wanted to talk to the old timers and get some war stories from what they'd seen in the past. And they all looked at me and said, "Come on, all that's all ancient history. That stuff doesn't go on anymore." Then I saw the cheap fireworks. I saw the green fireball. I saw some silver orbs and a number of things that I couldn't explain. There was a landing out at, prior to what is now known as the Joyful Journey Hot Springs. There was an actual landing out there that was witnessed by the caretaker. There was a blast hole from where it took off, and about 2 feet down. And at the bottom of the blast hole was a live snake standing on its tail.
What?
It was there for 2 days. And my friend Steve Jambick got video of it, but he never sent me a copy.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So this is all like 91, 90, into 92. My brother had a incredible sighting on Blanca. So I kind of had an idea that maybe this wasn't all ancient history. Maybe there's stuff going on. So at the time, I had been writing for the local paper that sprung up in competition with the Crestone Eagle, and I was giving it was December 9th, 1992. There was a huge sighting, went right over town, 200-foot ovals, went right over your house, went out just onto the Baca Ranch. They hung there for a while, lighting up all the trees, and then they shot off to the west and south. Well, I heard rumors of this the following week. I had actually been gigging in South Fork or someplace. I wasn't there that night, but I started to hear rumblings. Wow, people saw this thing, and so I gave a New Year's Eve party about 3 weeks later, and we had about 40 people maybe that came through, 50, and at one point, everywhere I went in the party with little knots, groups of people talking about this UFO sighting. So I'm thinking, whoa, this is cool. So I started interviewing everybody separately, and started jotting down all these notes. And then I went to Kiz, who is the editor of the Crestone Eagle, and I said, Kiz, I think I got an idea for a really cool story. And she goes, okay, and 500 words. You got 2 weeks. Well, I said, oh, great, 2 weeks. Okay. So by the end of 2 weeks, I had talked to everybody who had ever come to the Valley and investigated. Linda Howe, Tom Adams, Gary Massey, David Perkins, Lynn Weldon, the head of the sociology department at Adams State, several county sheriffs. I had gotten unknown cases from Swatch County, which supposedly had never had animal mutilation cases. And I had enough, literally at the end of 2 weeks, I had enough to write a book. And I just couldn't believe that nobody had just even superficially dug into all this stuff. And not to mention the incredible hundreds and hundreds of sightings back in the 60s around the Snippy case. So I gave kids, and she wanted a 500 word article. I gave her 1,500. She ran the whole thing. And it's the only article the Crestone Eagle has had picked up by the International News Service. The AP and UPI all got a hold of it. It went around the world. There were reprints all over the place. It hit Lou Farish's UFO clipping service. I had to get a bigger mailbox because of all the mail that started coming in. Of course, this is pre-internet. And within 3 months, I had a major book deal with St. Martin's Press. Go figure. I was on national TV a couple of weeks later.
Wow.
So, yeah, it just, just add water.
That's funny.
When the angels point you in a direction, you got to, kind of at least sit up and take notice. So
that's pretty interesting. And
yep.
So what is your, just so you know, I've had, I've seen the fireworks only once. I've had two strange things that have happened to me in the valley. One time I was out in the Baca, in the flats, the desert with the mountains around me. And I looked up in the sky, and I thought, about 35, 40 feet above me, I thought it was a clear, sunny, beautiful day. I thought I saw like a clear plastic bag floating in the wind. And then I realized there was no wind. So I took a closer look at it, and I realized that it was shaped like a manta ray. And it was about 5 feet wide, and it was flapping its wings, and it was floating, but it was completely translucent. I could see right through it.
Wow.
Could only see like a weird, like the side effect of the sun on the side hitting it. That's why I saw it. And
Travel Constable.
Yes. And then I looked, and another one came, and I had
sky creatures.
Yeah. And they were dancing. And then a third one came, and I had three of them right above my head.
Wow.
And then they just kind of went away, right? They floated away. And I thought, what the hell? And that's actually when I found Trevor Constable. I found his book. I don't know if it was Sky Creatures. I can't remember the name of it. Oh,
I think he called them Sky. He called them Sky Critters.
Sky Critters. All right. So then another time I was sitting. It was in cold day in December, which is interesting because the event that you described happened in December because you had a New Year's Day party a few weeks after it happened. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a connection here. But I was sitting on my couch at like 7 a.m, having my morning coffee, and I looked across the way towards the mountains, and I saw a perfect corkscrew spiral going by at about 70 miles an hour. And it was like long, and it looked like it was made of smoke, and it was perfect. And I thought, what the hell? The neighbors who maybe have a fire going, and the wind blew it in a perfect corkscrew pattern. But then, I got on the internet a few weeks later, and I found they're called oh man, I'm gonna blow it here. There's a name for them that somebody there's this guy that photographed them, and they're also, you can see these same corkscrew like things around the space station, the ISIS space station. You can see them. Yeah, they're like, they shoot by, and I don't know what they are, but I think there's another form of sky critter or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, it's it's like all these people that are, and I can understand the romanticism and the, people wanting everything that we're seeing to be aliens from other planets coming here because we're so special. There's so much about what's going on in this closed system, which isn't a completely closed system, but for all practical purposes, it is.
Yeah.
And there's other intelligent tenants in the building. I'm convinced of it, and I think a lot of these phenomenal events could be natural processes that have gained some form of sentience and intelligence, and they may not rely on a form of technology that we would identify as technology. They may have a whole different set of energetic principles that they're able to manipulate and utilize. It makes a lot of sense to me. And plus another thing that people forget, and I'm really glad about Kevin Day and the UAPX effort of going out to Guadalupe Island with underwater drones. If you read the premier book about USOs, or unidentified submerged objects, of course, The Invisible Resonance by Ivan T. Sanderson is the preeminent book. Everybody should read it. He estimates that over 50% of all UFO sightings feature craft that are going in and out of water, or are closely associated with a big body of water. So when the Nimitz guys are talking about whole groups of these things zipping along underwater in formation and then flying out of the air and taking off, I think we should start, opening up the scenario a little bit and getting a little bit more creative in our thinking.
I'm 100% behind that one,
Yeah.
because I have, my own research has told me that there's some kind of plasma. I'm not sure what. The reason I say is because people always say that they hear the crackling sound. Their hair stands up on the end. They feel it. They feel kind of a charge around these things, and so I'm forming like this idea that we're living at the bottom of a plasma ocean, and we're surrounded by plasma beings all around us. We can't see them. Occasionally we can, and we have interactions with them, and they are intelligent. You're right. They have sentience.
Yeah.
It's the strangest thing of all. And I even think, and this is probably get me in tons of trouble with people, but I grew up in the Midwest in Nebraska, which is Tornado Alley. And I got to, as a kid, witness tornadoes. I actually got to see them. I actually was a tornado chaser with my 16 millimeter Bullets, trying to get something I could sell to NBC or something when I was
of course.
16. And I witnessed this tornado, and it was about a mile away. And first thing I noticed was that there was electrical charges around it, like lightning, right? And then I saw this farmer, driving as fast as away from this thing as he could on his tractor, and the damn thing was following him, right? And he was looking back, and he's like scared. And I was like, I have my binocular. No, I had my zoom lens. That's what it was. I was watching with my zoom lens, and I thought, my God, that tornado is chasing that guy, right? And I was like, and then there's the whole thing with tornadoes where they'll throw a piece of straw through an oak tree. You know that?
Right. Oh yeah.
How could that be? Come on. It's causing there's some kind of displacement or something that goes on there, I think.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know, but I just think that I think that you actually are the one that turned me. Reading your books is what turned me towards this, because the alien explanation just wasn't good enough.
No. The favorite story I love telling is this is the one that I kind of was nibbling on the bait of getting involved in investigating these things and everything, and that hook was right there, and it got set. I got handed 24 photographs 3 or 4 days after my New Year's Eve party by the local sheriff, who said he didn't think he had any files on animal mutilations or UFO reports or anything, but he would go down the basement and check. He said, we've gone and looked for murder cases from back then, and they disappear. And lo and behold, he gave me a call, said, "You around?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I want to drop something off." And he had a pile of 24 photographs. Well, only 2 of them had writing on the back. By the end of the next day, I'd identified all the cases and all the ranchers, because the deputy who was in charge of investigating the cases was still alive. and was able to sit down and go, oh, that's, this ranch, oh, that's this ranch. These were the early ones. This one was, later. And these
Wow.
are all the first mutilations as they came down from Cochito Pass in the west. They came down in August and September, and then ended up, nailing the valley big time. But
So go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that the picture that was closest to me was out in Moffett. Was a ranch that got hit by they mutilated their bull in beginning of June 1980. Well, this is 13 years later, but I wanted to go out and do my first interview, and so I went out to Virginia Sutherland's ranch. She's still there, I'm sure, and she told me, they were sitting down at dinner, and the sun had just set, and they heard this helicopter. And shoot, 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 and it seemed really low and really close, and it flew right over the house from the north to the south, and then they kind of heard it either fade away or land, but they didn't pay much attention. Their power line's about 3 miles away, and they see choppers checking the lines, so they figured just some guy out joyriding a little bit. So about 20 minutes later, they hear the thing fire up, and it definitely had landed about a mile south in their pasture, and it started flying back in the direction it had come from, to the north. And so they ran outside, and the thing flew right over their house. It was a old whirlybird U-47, an antique that you see hanging in air museums, and it was mustard yellow in color with no ID, no numbers, no indication at all of what it was or where it was from or who was flying it. So they thought, well, that's weird. And so the next morning, they went out to check and see where this guy, had landed, and they found their bull mutilated. Now, I'm interviewing these folks 13 years later, right? And so, I was jotting notes and had my little tape recorder. And so I was, the next morning, I was sitting drinking coffee in my robe, my underwear, and typing up my notes, and I hear this dum, 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 and I look out my window and I said, honey, Brisa, quick, come here and look. What is that? And they said, that's an old-fashioned yellow helicopter. Flew right over my house. Whoa. Swear to God. Man, I'll tell you, I kissed the tar baby. That was it. I was hooked for life.
Hooked for life. You think that was a coincidence?
No way.
No way.
They called every mechanic, every rental place, every airport, every FAA office. Nobody knew who owned the helicopter. It only had a 90-mile range. It couldn't even have flown from Alamosa to Moffett and back. They said that they must be mistaken. That's not what you saw. I saw it too, or something similar 13 years later. That's when I realized that this is infinitely more complex than simple, aliens visiting from another planet. There's way more going on.
Yeah, that's incredibly silly to think that aliens would fly all the way here to steal the innards of a cow. But so there, as you in your book Mysterious Valley, you have a lot of helicopter mutilation correlations going on. What is going on there?
Well, Tom Adams, who was my mentor along with David Perkins for the first 6 years, pretty much, he sent me I don't know how many boxes full of hard data, files, letters, reports. I mean, boxes and boxes of stuff that he sent me, and one of the things that he had compiled was called The Choppers and the Choppers, which is a listing of 350 helicopter, documented helicopter reports to law enforcement in and around mutilation sites. Now, you ask Linda or, maybe some of the other investigators.
That would be Linda Moulton Howe.
Yes, Linda Moulton Howe, who trained me how to, instructed me how to properly interview people in this realm, which I'm forever grateful, because she's probably one of the better or best interviewers around. She's very good at what she does. Her conclusions, that's a whole nother show. But she talked to the former sheriff of Los Animas County, Lou Girodo, and Lou said, hey, I saw this helicopter turn into a silver sphere and fly away. And so that really impressed Linda back in 79, 80. Ever since then, she thinks that UFOs are masquerading as helicopters. Well, I have footage that my surveillance camera setup captured of a helicopter flying by, little two-man helicopter in the distance. And then when it hits the proper angle of the sun hitting the canopy, which is round, it balloons into a silver ball.
Yeah.
And if I just clipped off the first 2 seconds of the footage, I could have palmed it off as an incredible daylight, silver orb sighting. But that's not my style.
No.
I want to try to figure out what's really going on,
Yeah. And so, what's your conclusions about the choppers and the choppers?
It's most of it is afterwards. So I think that it's a combination of things. I think at the beginning of a wave, real high strange events that we cannot explain, the type that Linda loves, and the type that are real titillating and sensational. They tend to be at the beginning of a wave, and that's when the helicopters are seen after the fact. And then it's like other groups almost are clued in or keyed in by these initial cases, and then they start doing their cases, and at least 2 of these groups use helicopters. And we've had cases of helicopters with cows seen slung underneath. We've had cases of helicopters landed next to animals that later are discovered as mutilated. We've had helicopters that are seen harassing ranchers. In one case in Missouri, I think it was in 71 or 73, I forget. The rancher came out and he was so upset. He had some mutilations, and he saw this chopper and he started firing at it. Well, the chopper started firing back. Whoa. And then guys in the pasture who were hidden started firing from the ground. And so he got into a gunfight with 2 different teams, one on the ground and one in the helicopter. And this isn't the only time it's happened. These are the types of cases that, the ET believers don't really want to address. They don't want to address the half a dozen cases that happened in the San Luis Valley in 75, where the animals were shot and then mutilated. Sometimes, they were still warm. So I think early on, the modus operandi, it just didn't work because they were actually taking the animals. Very few animals were left on the ground in 70, 71. And then because they were taking the animals, of course, that's grand theft. Police reports are filed. Vigilante groups form. People are armed, shooting at military helicopters flying by, shooting at, utility copters. And so it became a dangerous situation. So for the entire year of 1972, there were no mutilations, not one. And then 73 through 79, all hell broke loose in the Midwest and West. And they left them on the ground because then a report doesn't get filed and they have plausible deniability. Oh, it's scavengers. Oh, it's Satanists. That's one of their favorite ones. So, my book, Stalking the Herd, of course, goes into all this.
Yeah, great book.
It's the only book that really does. I look at all the different memes, how they got started, who started them, how long they lasted, who keeps propagating certain ones, and, throwing it against the wall and see what sticks. So if you really want to know about the subject, I feel it's the biggest, most important subject of the paranormal that is totally overlooked and totally, it's the bastard red-haired stepchild of the paranormal realm. Right. But you can't argue with thousands of pounds of physical evidence. you know?
Yeah, what I like about stalking the herd is that you go back into the history of our relationship with cows, which
Yeah,
was really fascinating. And
yeah,
I remembered some of my own research, and I remember thinking how strange it was that in India a few thousand years ago, the leaders outlawed eating of cows.
right,
But the people that ran the country still ate cows, and
right,
the gods that they worshipped, demanded sacrifices, and the sacrifices were cows, and you would leave them in front of the caves, and then they come back the next day, and the cow was gone. And then there's the stories of I believe it was in England or something in the 1700s. People were at church, and they heard a cow mewing really loud, and they all ran outside, and there was like a UFO or something with the cow taking it up into the craft or something, and it's like, what is going on here, right? With this
right.
with this cow thing. Uh, are there aliens that like cows? Is it the military doing it for some reason?
Well, it's multiple groups, Jay. There's no way you can explain the types of cases, the number of cases, the in one night, I think at the height of it in 75 and maybe in 79, 8 different states suffered mutilations on the same night. To give you an idea about Travis Walton, the month before Travis, all around Heber, Snowflake, that whole area,
Yeah.
Susanville, there were the only mutilations that Arizona really ever had. There were 12 of them. And then there were 2 down in Pinal County, but they may have been weird scavenger action that, people were freaked out and thought they were mutilations. But there were definitely 12 mutilations the month before Travis got his abduction. So you can't rule ETs out. They may be involved, but it would be my least likely explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually thought for years that the mutilations were because they were taking the soft tissues, like around the lips and the tongue, that there was somebody looking for radiation levels.
Yes. Yeah, that's what David Perkins also thought. And he came up with a whole theory in 79. In fact, he came up with this very good map that correlates where we mine, utilize, enrich uranium or fissionable materials. And if you look at where these areas are and where the power plants are and the weapons labs and stuff, if you go downwind and downstream, those are the areas hardest hit by the mutilators.
Right, like Los Alamos, you're right.
Yeah. And then if you go, and also downwind of the Nevada test site, 100 above ground nuclear explosions spread radiation as far as the East Coast, with most of it in the upper Midwest in the Rocky Mountain region. And that's why there are very few mutilations, according to this theory, west of the Rockies. And now with Fukushima, we're starting to see, radiation levels on the West Coast, and we're starting to see mutilations there now.
Really?
So we had 6 in Oregon just a 4 months ago.
Well, I know that
six bulls.
I run a Geiger counter almost on a daily basis, and I can guarantee you the background radiation has gone up.
Yeah.
It has gone
up. Oh, absolutely.
Up. Yeah.
It's impossible for it not to.
Yep.
The Pacific Ocean is
dead.
It's gone. Within our lifetime, I don't think we'll be able to eat the fish. In fact, you really should be careful right now.
You should be. It takes, I think it takes 80 years for the oceans to circulate. Right. So 2011 is when Fukushima happened. So, towards the end of this century, the entire oceans will be completely saturated.
Yeah, but the tuna go back and forth twice a year.
They do. Yeah. No, and nobody talks about it. That's what's really disconcerting about it.
It's the biggest, most catastrophic cover up in the environmental
history,
annals of environmental reporting. It is absolutely. Right now, they are running out of room to store the radiated water.
Yep.
the nuclear pile has broken containment and gone through the bottom of the containment vessel, is burrowing its way into the ground,
Yep.
and it's already hit the groundwater, which is going directly into the Pacific. They're estimating 17 million gallons a day.
Yep.
And this has been going on 9 years?
9 years. Yep. I know.
9 years next month.
No, March 11th. March 11th it happened.
Oh, March 11th. Okay.
So it's been 9 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they like to do things like on 3/11, 9/11,
Yeah.
because
interesting.
the by the way, the coronavirus lockdown order.
Yeah.
3/11. Yeah. They love it.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Someday I'd like to have you on to talk about what you think is going on right now, but I want to get back to your work, because your work is more important. So, in the San Luis Valley, we have probably one of the most spectacular things that is the Great Sand Dunes, which is the largest sand dunes outside of, well, I don't know if it's the largest, but it's one of the biggest areas of sand dunes ever. And it's a spectacular place. There's no doubt
it's the largest pile of pure quartz, 98% glass.
Yeah. Tell us your theory on what you think maybe just tell us your theory on it. Because
okay. I've of course got to know the superintendent out there and some of the workers, the head ecologist, the head geologist. And, after talking to him on and off for 5, 6, 7 years, you start to get to know him pretty well. And one day I went to Fred Bunch, who's I think way up now. He's like second in command now, I think. I'll probably get in trouble saying this, but I said, Fred, I've been wanting to ask you, do you really believe the theory that the government is telling all the visitors about prevailing, westerly winds, or grabbing sand from the old lake that was here and then piling it up in a crook in the mountains, and knowing, as Fred did, that they did a core sample. They went down the middle of the dunes to the bottom, to the ground level, down 700-800 feet, and they hit wood. They hit an ancient forest that had been covered up by the sand. Well, what can you do with wood? You can carbon-14 date it, right?
Yep.
Guess how old the dunes are?
How old?
They're only 11,000 years old.
Well, that's also the end of the Younger Dryas, and all sorts of things happened 11,000 years ago.
Well, you don't pile an 800-foot high, 49 square mile sandbox of sand in 11,000 years. I'm sorry.
And by happenstance, the wind is picking up just the really fine silicate, right? It's right. I mean, it's a different
by their explanation. But I said, Fred, knowing all this, do you really believe what you're telling me? He goes, no, we don't really know how it got there. And I said, well, why are you telling people this? He goes, well, we got to tell them something. I had a physicist friend call me, and he says, oh, I think I figured it out. I said, what? And he goes, I think I know how the sand dunes got formed. And he says, okay, bear with me. Supposedly there's ant people there, right, that protect the Indians when they go down the Dollar Lake, down underneath when Dollar Lake drains, and then they go underground, and the northern Pueblo tribes and the Tiwa, they go there and they're protected underground. Well, what if the ant people, are running out of space and they live under the Sangres? And we both know the Sangres have these huge caverns in there that are filled with quartz. So maybe what they're doing is they're powdering up the quartz to make more room and kicking it out the back door. I mean, this is a tenured physicist telling me that, all excited, thinks he nailed it, and I'm like, well, I never thought of that, but hey, it sounds just as good as any other explanation. So I don't know.
So the sand dunes are the greatest tailings ever found on Earth.
Yeah, like a harvester ant pile,
Yeah, have you know about the mounds near Olympic Washington?
No.
Yeah, okay. So right near Olympic Washington are
Olympia or the
Olympia.
Olympic
I'm sorry,
Peninsula?
Olympia,
Yeah, the
Washington,
capital.
the capital. And I've been there. There's these mounds of dirt, and they're about 30 feet high, and there's literally hundreds and hundreds of them, and they're
Huh.
each mound is the same size, and they're all in a straight line. They're all in squared off in 90-degree angles to each other, and they've built highways through them, and they've got farms that are built through them, and
Wow, I did not know that.
yeah, and I know this sounds crazy, but when I saw them 20 years ago or whenever I was there, I looked at Mount Rainier, and I looked at these mounds, and I thought, no, this can't be like tailings from some underground, putting something in Mount Rainier, could it be? And I said, no, it's crazy. This can't be. But they definitely look like they've been placed there by intelligence. And it
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
looks like a tailings
yeah.
operation. And I have to say, the mounds, the sand dunes, that's probably one of the best explanations because of the quality of the quartz, right?
Well, yeah, it's almost pure quartz. It's 98% with just a little bit of constituent elements in it. I've heard people say it's the largest pile of quartz on the planet.
Yeah, I believe
You
it.
go to other sand dune deserts and they don't have the purity or the in terms of quartz the level of quartz in it.
Interesting.
Whether that's I'm not sure how. I've never actually done research on that and tried to prove it out and make sure that it's not just somebody's wild claim. But
I'll
I
look
think
into it.
if you go out to the dunes, I think they do mention something about that in the material.
I'll have to check
Um,
it out.
yeah, one thing about the dunes, it is the epicenter of activity there. It's not by accident that the first of our UFODAP surveillance cameras is 12 miles directly opposite of it. And
Yeah, tell us
we
about that.
yeah, the UFODAP project is something I've been um, very proudly now involved with. It started with Wayne Hollenbeck and myself wanting to do the San Luis Valley camera project and do 3 triangulated coordinated cameras over the internet to be able to triangulate and really get azimuth, distance, speed, size, all the things that you can get if you're triangulating on a aerial phenomenon.
Right.
Well, about 5 years ago, we met an engineer named Ron Olsch, who is I mean, he's like a super inventor, computer scientist, electrical engineer, and he's written software that's incredible. It detects motion, it locks onto the motion, it sends GPS coordinates to the other cameras, all the stuff that we wanted to do, but really didn't have the code writing ability to do. He's written over, I think, 10 or 15,000 lines of code, and he's worked a number of years on developing the software. So with a pan tilt zoom camera in an environmental enclosure, I mean, these things have got to withstand, down to 40 below there
Oh yeah.
and upwards. And then on the up end, they can handle up to 125 Fahrenheit. So these cameras are all linked by the internet. And so if an object appears, the camera closest zooms in on it. The other cameras stay further back and then slowly zoom as it's depending on what the software needs it to do. And there's a bounding box like targeting software and in a jet fighter, and so it keeps it in the center of the screen. And then we have a box called a multi-sensor data acquisition unit, or MSDAU, which has a variety of scientific sensing equipment, including a magnetometer, accelerometers, a gravitometer. We're putting in a radio frequency spectrum analyzer, and we're also going to be working with a 4th camera that is going to have a blaze grating on it, which will then separate the nighttime events, will separate the light into its constituent spectra so that we can analyze the actual light that's being given off by the objects. This is all going to be tied with Radar Alert 24, or the real-time tracking of commercial planes and stuff to factor out any commercial traffic. It's also going to be tied into, it has complete atmospheric, the same package actually as it's on the space station: humidity, temperature, barometric pressure, and then it will have other inputs that you can input, EMF meters, any number of scientific equipment. And it's all, when the event happens, everything goes into record. So you're recording these events with up to 5 different scientific measuring devices and 3 triangulated cameras that are plotting the object and its path on Google Maps. So, wow. And then it zings off a email to alert us.
That is
so
cool.
These systems are commercially available. We're selling one to the Ohio State University. We've got one promised to a radio astronomer in Bologna, Italy. We've sold systems to the guy that owns the property right next door to Skinwalker Ranch. We have a system that's up in the Wasatch in northern Utah, a system that's on the coast in San Pedro, California, a system that's going on up on the east side of Mount Adams, south of Walla Walla.
Yep.
And we have a number of other groups and individuals interested, including in Australia, Switzerland. So it's taking off. People are starting to realize that the only way that we're going to overwhelm the mystery is with data. And if we can get a network of data acquisition units out there around the world, we'll be able to slowly start to get a usable database of real scientific data, and we'll be able to bring in the best analysts. I know the very best analysts, and get their opinion on what we're looking at once they've reviewed the data. And so we literally, if we can replicate some of these things, we will be the first people to actually be able to actually write and publish a scientific paper in an optical physics journal or in a variety of different disciplines. So this is something that's been a dream for 20 years. Because of the cost of technology has come down, and miniaturization and quality, what you can do for $5,000 is a full-blown system. You couldn't have done for $2 million. Yep. When I first got started in the 80s, there's just no beating the progress of technology.
You may want to, I'm working with a group of guys and people, all over the planet, mostly Europe and America, and we're using ultraviolet and infrared filters on our still and video cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And try to capture these things, whatever they are, because several people have said that they can't see them, but they can see them when they take it with the ultraviolet. And so somehow the objects are able to stay out of the spectrum. So I don't know.
Well, Trevor James Constable, all those pictures he got was on IR film.
Yeah, that's right, infrared. And I have a full spectrum camera now, and nice. I have the filters and everything. So and there's a crazy person on YouTube. He's like maybe 25 years old. He sets his camera up at the sky, and then he goes out with a mirror, and he catches the sunlight and flashes it into the sky for like 10 minutes. You think he's nuts watching him. And then he sits down and he goes, just wait, they'll show up. And then all of a sudden you'll see these orbs start coming in on the camera. It's like,
oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I got to try that.
Yeah, I'm going to try it too, actually.
Yeah, sending I guess alien smoke signals or something.
Yeah. So well, that's a very cool system you got there.
Well, yeah, and if people are interested in finding out more, we have a complete website. It's UFO DAP, Data Acquisition Project, DAP.
I'll put a link up.
.com, and we have a store all set up, and everything's available, and we customize the system for your particular application, where you are, what your vantage points are. We have a variety of cameras, a variety of options, so that you get exactly what you need. They can either be mounted on towers, like our second camera is going up on a cell tower. They could be mounted on the side of your house, at the peak of the house on the side, or we have these really good tripods, so you can have it actually as a portable system.
So if you're you're living in a hot spot, or you're seeing a
Yep.
lot of UFOs, definitely want to get this. And
Yep, this is it. This is historic. No one's ever done this before.
I agree, it is historic, and we're
Yeah.
finally getting serious about this, and
Yeah.
that's what I like about it, is we're taking it seriously, and you're open-minded. I mean, you're not you don't think it's just aliens. You think that there's something much more
and
complex.
that's at least like the explanation. I think that we're the aliens, and they're more terrestrial than we are, actually.
I do too, actually. I'll give you my theory. My theory is that when we blew the atomic bomb off in 1945, we killed a bunch of these plasma creatures in the explosion, and they got really concerned because strange. The very first UFO sightings, aliens,
were groups.
Yes, and they were saying you're going to destroy your planet, and you got to take care of it and everything. And
why? Because they live here and we're putting them in danger.
Exactly. Why would aliens care?
Well, maybe that, I mean, there's all these sci-fi things. Right. Well, you're creating a rent in the force, or a ripple in the force or something. Yeah. Well, they tell that to the next supernova that goes off and obliterates, how many planets and nearby stars. I don't think popping off a few little thermal nukes it's only gonna bother the people that are here and intelligences that are here that feel threatened by that.
That's right.
So that's always made sense. That's why they showed up in 47. And when they showed up, those first 3 years, they didn't show up one or two.
No.
They showed up 9, 12. I mean, we just had the anniversary of the Farmington Armada, which is, geez, I don't even know. How many were in that? 100?
Yep.
It was like they filled the sky.
And don't forget that Kenneth Arnold, who saw the ones over Mount Rainier.
Yeah, there were 9 of them.
Yeah, 9 of them. He later said, as he got older, that he thought that they were some kind of plasma.
That they were alive.
Yep, that they were alive, exactly. And that's what these creatures are. The plasma creatures are alive, and they can interact with us. Then you can also take in that we know that super high amounts of electricity can cause these rents in the space-time continuum, because when Tesla got hit with 3 million volts one time, for just a split second, he got hit with 3 million volts, and he told a reporter later that day that he saw his past, his future, and the present all at the same time.
Wow.
And Andrew Collins, the great English researcher, I'm going to try to get on the show, he wrote a book called Light Quest about 2 years ago. And he talks about how these people will see these orbs, and that the orb will come in and they'll have like a interdimensional experience where they'll see other worlds and other things, but it's not an alien or anything.
Yeah.
And then when I ran this by Travis Walton at that conference that I saw you at last time, and I ran it by, I said, Travis, you say that, you've changed your mind a little bit about your experience, and maybe it wasn't as, physical as you first thought. And he said, that's right. I don't think it was physical. It was more like a dream. And so I didn't tell him about my theory or anything, but I came away feeling like he had been taken into one of these orbs, and he had a really strange multi-dimensional experience, which again, because you have no anything to compare your experience to.
Yeah, point of reference.
Yeah, you begin thinking, oh, it's aliens, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're Catholic,
and that could be all theatrical too, and they could be presenting that scenario to make you feel comfortable. I think, I forget who said it, but they said, maybe Terrence McKenna said, the aliens, if we could actually see how they really are, we couldn't handle it. So what they're doing is they're conforming, they're creating an illusion of something that we can handle and
Yeah.
that we can actually identify with. But the true nature of them is so beyond what we are even capable of understanding that they have to dumb it down.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Oh, Terrence was such a genius. He was a
Yeah,
good friend of mine. He told me one time he'd read Whitley Strieber's communion books,
right.
right? And he said, I love Whitley Strieber, don't get me wrong. But he said, Whitley thinks that he's being abducted by aliens. He should just come over to my house any Saturday night. It's happening all the time at my house.
Yeah, call him forth on command.
And also, I was talking to Whitley Strieber's wife when she was still alive. She was a beautiful woman, and
She was a sweetie.
she was. And I said to her,
a tough sweetie.
"Oh, she protected him. Oh my God,
Oh, I know.
she did."
Yeah.
And I said, "So you've been hanging with Whitley all these years. What do you think about his abductions?" And she said to me, "Well, I got to be honest with you. I couldn't sleep one night, so I just went down to the living room and read my book, and Whitley was up in bed, sleeping. And then he gets up in the morning and tells me that the aliens came into the house and took him to the ship and everything, but he was in the bed the whole time." And the story really struck me, and I thought, wow, what is really going on here? Is Whitley got a lot of dimethyltryptamine in his brain, and it's being released while he's sleeping, and he's having.
Well, maybe this will put it into context. Hoyt Velarde, for 30-something years, was the head of the Department of Public Safety in Dulce for the Hickory Apache. Right. And I met him, back in 95, I think. And we spent, 6 hours at a coffee shop. I never drank so much coffee and peed so much in my life. But at one point, he said that he was in training for his medicine lineage of his clan. And his grandfather, he asked him one time, "Grandfather, what are these ships that we see, these silver ships?" And he said, he gave, like, "I'll do it on this." He went like this. And he took a, I think it was a salt shaker on the table, and he goes like this. He puts it here, and then he goes, bang. Nay, don't ever ask me again. And so I said, "Well, wait a minute, Hoyt. What the hell is that supposed to mean?" He goes, "Well, think about it. They don't take you up to a ship. They're coming from some other dimensional space, and the ship forms around you." And I said, "Wow,
that is cool. That is really cool."
Yeah. So next time you see Hoyt, it's like one of those Native American things. It's just a couple of gestures and that's the only word that he used. So
and it's well known that these interdimensional things happen around Native American reservations quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
I mean, J.C. Johnson, late great J.C. Johnson,
really good friend of mine.
Oh, he's an amazing guy. Really regret.
Best storyteller I ever met.
He was, man. He was. That guy was incredible, and these interdimensional creatures were like attracted to him because everywhere he would go, they would come in out of the out of the nowhere, and and he would tell me that that down at Dulce was such a hot spot because of there was these interdimensional things going on all the time.
Well, you know what I've been told off the record by a couple of law enforcement types and also a couple of people live there. the same way everybody thinks everything's UFOs, and there are a bunch of Bigfoot sightings and stuff. Hoyt said that he investigated 100 Bigfoot sightings, including he had one at his property that he was close enough to touch, almost throw a rock at it. And they said, but you know what people see the most often, and it's the one thing that they will not talk about: the dwarves.
Yeah, the little people.
the
Yeah.
little 2 foot high, hairy. They're wide. They're extremely mischievous.
Yep.
I have been tracking down. There's security footage from the old casino of these little things jumping from car to car and denting people's hoods and trunks. And they got security footage of it, and it was absconded by the DPS guys and put into, they have a file cabinet called their X files. At least that's what he called them when he told me this. And I have a $10,000 reward.
Oh, God, I'd love to see that video.
If I could get that footage.
Oh, I'd help you out on that. I'd raise it. I'll put another 5 in.
Yeah.
I mean it. I want to see that footage.
Yeah. Well, there's a number of people that saw it, and the woman who actually was on duty and recorded all this, her brother was the one that told me. And at the time, this is back in 2010, I think, she was on her last legs, dying of cancer, which is so prevalent around there because of the gas buggy, Project Gas Buggy, where they blew up a 47 megaton bomb below Dulce, about 5,000 feet, to free up a gas deposit. And all it did was irradiate all the gas, and then totally trashed and irradiated the water table. And so they have the highest rates of environmental cancers in the Hickory Apache Reservation. And I think that the Dulce base rumors are to hide the fact that the government has been burying nuclear waste from Los Alamos in the res.
Oh, man.
Because gas buggy is the perfect plausible deniability. And so they're trying to get people to look at Archuleta Mesa, when about 13 miles to the west is Archuleta Mountain, right. Which is where all this stuff is going on. You heard it here first.
That is scary. That is truly scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel sorry for those Native Americans that live there. They've really been. All of the Native Americans in the West have been treated really badly. I mean,
the ones in the East and on the extreme West are extinct.
They are. We did a pretty good job on that one. So I want to thank you for telling us your many stories.
Sure.
It was quite amazing.
Yeah.
And I'll put links to your site on my thing, and I'll also mention all the books. Get all of his books. You. Christopher O'Brien, Stalking the Herd is his best book, but The Mysterious Valley and Enter the Valley. That's right. Enter the Valley.
Right. And then Secrets of the Mysterious Valley is a compilation book with an extra 10 years of investigative work.
That's actually the better one to get, is the Secrets.
Secrets. That's the inclusive, all-inclusive one. Yeah. And then I'm coming out with a book that's going to be all the Mysterious Valley reports that I put together, which is a month-by-month, day-by-day, week-by-week listing of how I investigated all my cases, and it really shows you how much work it takes to attempt to do a proper job. And I only was able to lick the tip of the iceberg. So many reports, so many stories. Just I'm only one guy. I can only do so much. And I was I was burning the candle at both ends and a blowtorch in the middle. And there's just no way that after so many 18-hour days, you just work in construction, gigging, it's crazy. It's amazing I was able to accomplish as much as I did.
Well, you were the pioneer, that's for sure. You put the place on the map and opened up the possibilities for a new way to look at the paranormal, which is really what I like about what you do. Yeah. And it's caused me to rethink my whole view of it too.
Yeah. All this stuff is interrelated. John Alexander, I think, has been
Yep.
really touting the connecting points between all this stuff. And I think a mechanism that ties it all together is the trickster.
Everybody, thanks for watching Reality Check. I'm Jay Weidner. Make sure you subscribe and like and all that. And thanks for watching.